December 5, 2023 News Report 1. The Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States, General Grady, attended a meeting of the Grand Council on December 4, announcing that the U.S. military is now capable of simultaneously supporting Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, forming a formidable military force. Grady emphasized that the United States possesses a diverse operational framework, enabling it to fulfill the three missions in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan concurrently. This capability is not only part of the operational process but also a core element of the U.S. defense strategy. However, Grady also pointed out that if the U.S. Congress fails to promptly pass a comprehensive appropriations bill to support Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, these three missions will become even more challenging. News Report 2. On December 5, Israeli Defense Minister Gantz condemned the violent actions of some Jewish settlers against Palestinians. Gantz emphasized that Israel is a country governed by law, and only personnel from the police, military, and security agencies have the right to use force. According to Palestinian statistics, since Hamas attacked Israel on November 7, more than 250 Palestinians have lost their lives in attacks by Israeli forces or Jewish settlers in the West Bank. Pentagon spokesperson Miller stated that the United States would take measures on December 5 to impose visa bans on individuals inciting violence in the West Bank. The U.S. visas of these individuals will be revoked, affecting an estimated dozens of individuals and families. Meanwhile, Israeli Chief of Staff Aviv Kohavi announced on December 5 that Israel's ground military operations have entered the third stage. Israeli forces are conducting operations against Hamas's main strongholds in the southern Gaza Strip. Southern Command Commander Finkelstein stated that since the evening of December 5, the military has entered the city center of Khan Yunis, engaging in intense clashes with Palestinian armed groups. It became the most intense day since Israel began its ground military operations in Gaza. Israel declared that it has surrounded the largest refugee camp in Gaza, the Jabalia refugee camp, which Hamas uses as a base. Additionally, Israeli forces will cease military operations in Rafah on the southern border of Gaza to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. News Report 3. The Washington Post reports that South Korea has provided a substantial amount of 155mm artillery shells to Ukraine, surpassing the combined total of all European countries. At the beginning of this year, Ukraine had a monthly demand for 90,000 units of 155mm artillery shells. Despite continuous production increases in the United States, the output only meets 10% of Ukraine's demand. Due to South Korean laws prohibiting the transport of weapons to conflict zones, negotiations took place between the U.S. and South Korean governments. South Korea agreed to indirectly supply ammunition through the United States. Since the beginning of this year, South Korea has provided Ukraine with 330,000 units of 155mm artillery shells in 41 days via air and sea transport. This generous gesture is related to Russia's activities behind North Korea, and South Korea sees it as an opportunity for retaliation. According to France 24, on December 5, Ukrainian President Zelensky notified U.S. Senate Majority Leader Schumer that due to unforeseen circumstances, he would be unable to attend the video briefing on the afternoon of December 6. Zelensky originally planned to address U.S. Congress members via video, seeking more U.S. assistance. Although the United States has provided several $1 billion in aid to Ukraine since the Russian invasion, congressional appropriations are nearing exhaustion, with some Republican members leaning toward supporting Israel or addressing the U.S.-Mexico border rather than continuing support for Ukraine. News Report 5. On December 5, European Commission President von der Leyen, in an interview with AFP, stated that the EU will not tolerate trade imbalances with China. Von der Leyen pointed out that the EU has tools to protect its market but prefers to resolve issues through negotiations. It is noteworthy that the EU-China Leaders Summit is scheduled to be held in Beijing on December 7, marking the first offline meeting between the leaders of both sides since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019. Von der Leyen and European Council President Michel will participate in this EU-China summit, with key discussions covering bilateral trade, the Ukraine war, and other conflicts. Von der Leyen's statement not only sets the tone for the EU-China summit but also prepares public opinion for the upcoming investigations into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies, steel anti-dumping, and other matters. She emphasized that the EU-China trade imbalance is continuing to worsen, with the trade deficit doubling over the past 2 years and reaching €400 billion. The EU is not seeking to decouple from China but rather hopes to mitigate the excessive tilt in bilateral relations to reduce risks. Von der Leyen stated that the EU has laid options on the negotiation table, and China needs to decide whether it is willing to make concessions to maintain bilateral relations. News Report 6. The Institute for Supply Management, ISM, released data on December 5, showing that the Non-Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, in the United States reached 52.7 in November, a 0.9% increase from the previous month, exceeding the market's expectation of 52%. Regarding specific indices, the Business Activity Index was 55.1, a 1% increase, the New Orders Index was 55.5, remaining stable, the Services Employment Index was 50.7, growing by 0.5%, and the Supplier Deliveries Index was 49.6, rising by 2.1%. In November, the United States saw growth in 15 industries, including retail, accommodation, catering, real estate, and finance and insurance. Only 3 industries experienced declines, indicating that commercial activities in the United States continue to grow. In addition, according to data released by the U.S. Department of Labor on December 5, job vacancies in October were 8.73 million, a decrease of 610,000 compared to the previous month and lower than the market's expectation of 9.3 million, reaching the lowest level since March 2021. This data suggests that the previously tight labor market is easing. In October, the job vacancy to unemployment ratio dropped to 1.3 to 1, a significant improvement compared to the previous 2 to 1. This implies that the U.S. economy is undergoing a soft landing process. News Report 7. New Island Daily reports that according to the latest data released by the Hong Kong Hospital Authority, the occupancy rate of internal medicine beds in Hong Kong hospitals has reached 103%, and the pediatric bed occupancy rate is also as high as 103%, with the pediatric bed usage rate reaching 101%. Recently, respiratory diseases, mainly nose viruses and intestinal viruses, accounted for 10%, with subinfluenza viruses at 5.2% and adenoviruses at 4.4%. The incidence of influenza and COVID-19 is relatively low. According to Professor Yuan Kwok Young, an infectious disease expert at the University of Hong Kong, in the past 3 months, there have been an average of 110 to 170 cases of children admitted to the hospital each month due to pneumonia support infections, an increase of 1 to 2 times compared to August. Yuan Kwok Young stated that the transmission speed of pneumonia support bodies in Hong Kong is not as fast as the flu, and most infections occur in very close contact, so citizens need not be overly concerned. He pointed out that the Hong Kong government will strengthen border checks, especially for people with fever symptoms, to identify whether there is a new infectious disease. In another report, South China Morning Post journalist Chen Minli disappeared after going to China for an interview at the end of October during the Xiangshan Forum, losing contact with the rear. Concerned that he was detained in China, he later returned to South China Morning Post after several months but was transferred to a non-political news department and has not published any articles since March this year. Reports suggest that Chen Minli stayed in China to handle private affairs when he disappeared. Still, the Committee to Protect Journalists expressed concern about the situation, noting that China detains over 100 journalists, expressing concern for Chen Minli. News Report 8. Radio Free Asia reports that members of the pro-democracy political party Civic Party in Hong Kong conducted an outdoor excursion on December 4. The Hong Kong police claimed that Civic Party members violated the Hong Kong version of the national security law, leading to a routine inspection lasting over 2 hours at the tourist site Rhino Rock in Shek O. Civic Party Vice Chairman Alvin Young stated that on that day, more than 20 Civic Party members took a bus for the tour. Upon reaching the destination, they found a large number of uniformed and plainclothes police waiting at the station. The police conducted body searches and checked personal belongings of Civic Party members, with Young suggesting the possibility of surveillance. The police claimed that Civic Party members had the intention of incitement, suspected of violating the Hong Kong version of the national security law. However, after over 2 hours of inspection, the police did not find any evidence of wrongdoing, and no one was arrested. Even those intercepted due to pandemic reasons were released. Young estimated that this action might be related to the upcoming Hong Kong District Council elections on December 10, and the government is concerned about possible protests, thus initiating such inspections. This has raised concerns about the current situation in Hong Kong, with some accusing the government of increasingly interfering with normal gatherings and activities, making Hong Kong more tense. News Report 9. A survey report released by the German Chamber of Commerce shows that German companies in China are actively taking measures to reduce cooperation risks with China. The report indicates that 83% of German companies are taking measures to mitigate risks of doing business in China. The main reasons include tensions in geopolitical relations, accounting for 45%, and concerns about the economic slowdown in China, accounting for 83%. In addition, 25% of companies believe that China is more focused on self-reliance, which is also one of the reasons for risk reduction. To reduce the risk of cooperation with China, German companies have taken multiple measures, including establishing supply chains independent of China, shifting supply chains to areas outside of China. Additionally, some companies choose to transfer some operations to other Asian countries and expand their markets in Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and India, among others. The survey shows that 37.9% of German companies plan to increase investment in Vietnam, 30% plan to increase investment in Thailand, and 23% plan to increase investment in Malaysia. It is noteworthy that India has relatively lower attractiveness in this regard, with only 7.5% of companies planning to increase investment in India. The survey covered the period from September 5 to October 6, with a total of 566 German companies participating, providing a fairly representative sample. According to data from the German Federal Statistical Office, China has been Germany's largest trading partner for 7 consecutive years, with bilateral trade reaching €298 billion last year, exceeding the €248 billion in trade between Germany and the United States. Last year, Germany imported goods worth €190 billion from China, a year-on-year increase of 33%, while exports to China reached €100 billion, a year-on-year increase of 3.1%. News Report 10. The official website of the Supreme People's Court of China announced that on December 5, the Intermediate People's Court of Dayang City, Sichuan Province, sentenced Zhang Wufang, the director of the National Grain and Materials Reserve Bureau, to 10 years in prison for bribery and fined him 1 million yuan. Zhang Wufang, 63 years old, from Laiwu, Shandong Province, had served as the deputy governor of Shandong Province and became the director of the National Grain and Materials Reserve Bureau in 2017, serving for 5 years. The court pointed out that from 2003 to 2022, Zhang Wufang abused his power to seek private benefits for others and received bribes equivalent to 16.47 million yuan, of which 1.6 million yuan had not yet been received at the time of the case. The court stated that Zhang Wufang truthfully confessed to all his crimes, showing significant merit. However, he was ultimately sentenced to prison and fined, raising some questions. The court pointed out that Zhang Wufang only received more than 11 million yuan during his 5-year term as director, which is around 3 million yuan per year. Therefore, the magnitude of his sentence is considered strange. In addition, some senior officials of the National Grain and Materials Reserve Bureau have been successively investigated in the past period. Deputy Director Su Ming of the Grain and Materials Reserve Bureau was investigated in July 2021, Deputy General Manager Su Baoyi of the Grain Reserves Management Group was investigated in January last year, and Deputy General Manager Zhou Zheng of COFCO Group was investigated in November this year. The investigation of these officials reflects China's ongoing efforts to combat corruption. News Report 11. Bloomberg reports that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang held talks with Japanese Minister of Economy, Trade, and Industry Koichi Hagiuda on December 5. Koichi Hagiuda stated that the development of domestically produced generative AI in Japan requires NVIDIA's assistance and hopes that NVIDIA can stably supply graphics processing units, GPUs, to Japan. Jensen Huang stated that NVIDIA will invest in education and research in Japan and support startups, emphasizing the strengthening of cooperation with Japanese companies to quickly develop domestically produced generative AI. This news has raised some questions because the detailed reasons for why NVIDIA would invest in Japan are not clear.